Hello. So a few weeks or last video I made, the Contrabassoon Low C video, I said that I would be doing a This Week in Subcontrabassoon video on Sunday. However, as you've probably noticed, it is not Sunday. But I think at the end of this video you will appreciate, or you will be glad that I waited. So, okay. Sorry, I didn't think I had the pictures, but I do. Okay, so, kind of the first big thing I worked on, the past few weeks is, this is the center column that I talked about in a previous video. So this is in multiple pieces. We can take a closer look here. And what this does is this allows you to turn this center brass section to slightly lengthen or shorten the column to adjust the amount of not only the length but the amount of tension it puts on the instrument. The purpose of this column is to kind of sandwich the two sandwich the body joints in between the two frames. So this allows fine control of that rather than having to weld up one solid piece and hope that it's perfect. And this works, this turnbuckle works because it has these two pieces. One has a left-hand thread, one has a right-hand thread, so that when you turn the center piece, they pull in at the same time or pull out at the same time. If they were both right-hand thread, it would just thread along the combined threaded part. Now there is a little interesting story about those jam nuts. Apparently, so one of the hazards of designing in the computer is you can end up putting things in the design that turn out to be a lot more difficult to find than you thought. Case in point, these little brass jam nuts. I kind of took for granted that you would be able to buy brass jam nuts in both left-hand and right-hand thread. But, long story short, I wasn't able to find left-hand threads. So I had to make one of the brass jam nuts from hex stock. At the same time, I made this center turnbuckle. Okay, so that's the column, the big piece in the middle, or not the big piece, the thing that sandwiches the frame pieces together. Hold on a second. I have a picture on my phone, and my computer's being stubborn and doesn't want me to be able to share that. Okay, so another thing I worked on is I got the body joints. These are the 8 largest 3D body joints that I'm going to be that I 3D printed. I got those assembled with ABS glue. And I also got these heat set inserts in place, and I've kind of lightly threaded these posts in. Those are just for looks right now. I'll secure those more permanently eventually. So I got all 8 of those assembled along with the bell over here. Sorry, let me forward this picture to my computer so I can show you all it. Okay, so this is the bell. This is also 3D printed in ABS, and because this is going to be hanging down, it's secured with 4 screws on these sides. Right now I just have some temporary screws of the right size in place. And that assembles with this. Well, these are still a little, these socket and tenons are still a little bit snug. I'm going to throw these on the lathe and make these tenons a little bit thinner so that they, because ideally I want the body joints with no string to be fairly loose. I want the string to be able to function as the waxed string to be able to function as the gasket that tightens everything up. Just the plastic pieces shouldn't be quite this tight. Okay, so that was what I worked on before yesterday, and what I would have been able to show you all if I had done this video on Sunday. But yesterday, I spent some time in the shop, and my dad was able to help me out, and we finally got those frame pieces assembled. So if you remember past videos, there was a lot of small steel plates and steel sockets that needed to be permanently attached some way or another. Let me get this picture, and you can see a picture. So you can see a in-process picture. So here, this is the top frame piece, and you can see it clamped in place. And we tried it a couple different ways. The top frame, the small frame that's connecting to the bell assembly, I soldered or brazed everything together. The bottom frame that includes the end pin, my dad TIG welded all of that together. And the top frame we did half and half. He TIG welded the sockets in place, and I brazed the studs on. So we got a lot of good ideas for how to do the next one. Don't quite know whether it would be welding or soldering is going to end up being the best solution. Welding introduces a lot of heat, which ends up warping the frame, so you kind of have to bend it back into place. Things don't fit quite as well as you would want them, or as they did before it was welded. Soldering introduces less heat, but I'm certainly not good at brazing yet, and my dad doesn't have much experience with it either. He mainly works on food processing equipment, so TIG welding is the way to go there. But so I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore. With the frame pieces put together and the body joints assembled, I'm able to get the overall instrument in one piece. Okay, so this is the 6 middle body joints. I'm going to have to back up quite a bit. So, the 6 middle body joints, this column that sandwiches everything together, this top frame piece, and if you look up here, you can see the sockets for the other 6 body joints that are going to go here, which is going to contain all the key work for the the right hand, and then here, which is going to contain all the key work for the left hand. Now, for the time being, I can't assemble everything together. This piece, the piece that I already showed you, does fit in here, but there's going to be some supports here and here to hold the bell in place. I haven't made those yet, so I can't add this piece quite yet, at least not without holding it precariously. And there we go. And the bottom, try to avoid banging into the ceiling. Here we have the bottom frame, including the end pin. Now, this is even before key work and before the rest of the body joints. This is a beefy instrument. But the way that I always describe it is, sure, it's big and cumbersome and complicated, but it's so much less complicated and so much smaller than the only other instrument that can play in this range, at least reliably, the 32-foot stop of the organ. So, it may not be the most portable instrument in the world, but it's a lot more portable than its competition. Now, you might notice if you look at the frame pieces, they're a little ugly right now. I haven't cleaned those up. The soldering especially is pretty awful. So we're thinking about having this electroplated, just to look pretty. But there's a few more pieces I need to solder or weld on before I would do that. If we go up here, this is going to be the tone hole for low G, which is closed by the low F key, and it needs a little tab here to hold the cable that's going to control that key. So I want to add that. Then we have the tone hole for F sharp, opened by the low F sharp key. The tone hole for low F, closed by the low E key. Down here, we have the tone hole for low E, closed by the low D key. On the front, the very bottom, this tone hole for low E flat. Low D, closed by the low C key. C sharp, right here. And low C, closed by the low B key. And then the tone holes for low B and B flat are on that other bell assembly. So, it's amazing how much more completed the instrument looks now that these frame pieces are together, and you can actually put it together all at once and kind of put it in your hands. Now, of course, you're going to be holding it from these 6 body joints that aren't yet ready. Someone just said, it's not a big instrument, Richard is just a garden gnome. I'm not tall, but I'm also not short. So, I can get rid of that conspiracy theory right now. Where was I? Yeah, so, I still don't know exactly how it's going to feel when you're holding it from those middle body joints that aren't finished yet. I also need the tube assembly, which is going to come in here and go all the way down to the tuning slide and back up to the bocal. And that's going to be conical nickel silver tubing. So that's going to be its own fun experience making that. But yeah, it's I wouldn't say a lot of progress because it actually didn't take all that long, but it makes visible a lot of the progress that we've been doing for several months now. Someone asked, will you play it sitting or standing? I'm sorry, I can barely read the computer screen because it's so far away, but the names are blocked off. The key work and the bocal are positioned to play from sitting position. So there's some questions there, because by the time you have the bocal in, it's probably going to be about out here. Now, with my leg length, you might actually be able to make some sort of leg brace, or I guess I should say like a knee brace to go on the instrument to hold it there. But I still think the best way to play it is going to be in a playing stand. So you have a stand out here. It's at the right angle so that the bocal, the reed, everything lines up, and you play it from the stand. I still think that's going to be the best approach. Yeah. So what's next is kind of a before I up on. Sorry about that. My computer logged out for some crazy reason. If you can hear me, if anyone's left, if you could just verify in chat that you can hear me. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Where was I? Okay. So the next thing I want to work on, if you remember back before the 3D printing diversion, when I decided to 3D print the 8 larger body joints, I need to go back and finally finish the other 6 body joints. And the plan is still to machine those out of solid plastic because of the extra how much key work is involved. I want it to be fairly solid. And actually, I'm going to go set this aside real quick, but here it is. Okay, so, yeah, I still want to return to, or I need to finish those other 6 body joints, and the plan is to still make them out of solid plastic, but I did have an interesting idea that I'm going to try. So, long time ago, you saw the beginnings of those 6 body joints where I was machining them out of solid Delrin, putting pilot holes in them, and starting on the bore. And I think I mentioned at some point we ended up with a significant delay due to losing some critical pieces to that steady rest. I think someone who works in my dad's shop set them somewhere crazy, and we couldn't find them for a long time. But the The most significant challenge there is putting a conical bore into a solid piece of plastic, because of course you can't buy conical thick wall plastic tubing. And that's still the plan, but I did have a backup plan that might be interesting. So right here, this is not a solid piece of Delrin. This is a piece of ABS tube. See if I can. But this isn't an extrusion. This is 3D printed. I used 100% infill and a 0.8 millimeter nozzle, which is twice as big. And I tried I figured if I can't buy, because in an ideal world I'd be able to buy ABS pipe with a bore already in place that I could just machine down. So I figured the next best thing is I could print a piece of ABS pipe like I'd want. This bore is a little bit undersized. It's conical. And the idea is, if this works, I might be able to put one pass on it with a reamer, bring it to final dimension, machine the outside, and save myself a lot of trouble. So as I'm working on the body joints that I've already started, I'm also going to try a little bit with this one, because if this ends up working, that could be a lot easier for Subcontrabassoon #1 as opposed to the prototype. Now the questions are whether or not, because I don't have a 3D printer with a 500 millimeter Z, so these are 4 pieces that have been chemically welded together with acetone. The question is, will that hold up to the rigors of machining? And also, as I machine it, how solid is that? Is that going to leave a whole bunch of little micro cavities in there from the tool path? I don't know, but I think it's worth finding out. But once again, that's going to run alongside the normal machining I'll be doing, not instead of. But anyway, that is the big news for now. If anyone has any last minute questions, now is the time. Let's see. I'll go ahead and scroll through some of the earlier questions. Will I play it sitting or standing? Oh yeah. So Vortex said, I'm guessing in response to when I was talking about getting those pieces electroplated, or you could buff the pieces. Yeah, that was the original plan, and I've done a little bit of that on some of the frame pieces. But to me, it makes sense to wait until I've definitively decided not to get it electroplated before buffing it, because there's really no point. There's no point spending a lot of time buffing it if it's going to be electroplated eventually. And I guess I should say it's electroplating is not quite the same as like silver plating or nickel plating. It's not an additive process where you're adding a layer of something. If that were the case, you'd need to completely clean it before. It's a process that removes a very thin layer. At least that's my understanding. So there's no point spending a lot of time cleaning. How do bassoon brands create conical bores? Well, when you're making hundreds of bassoons, it's worthwhile to have very expensive specialty machined reamers made. So like each bassoon bore will have or each bassoon joint will have like two or three reamers that they use to bring that to final dimension. In my case, I'm going to be using a combination of boring bars because I want a little more flexibility in my approach rather than waiting until... because if I end up needing to change something, I don't want to have invested, several $1,000s in reamers for a size of bore that I no longer am going to be using. But if you're building higher quantities, that makes sense. So I'll be using boring bars, and I'm only going to use a reamer for those handful of joints that are just too small to get a boring bar in, like this one, for example. This one, the bore is just too thin, or the bore is too small. You're never going to be able to get a boring bar through the 500 millimeters down in the end of this without it and get anything resembling a good finish. So this is one of the body joints that I will be making a reamer for, and I already have the material for that. I'm gonna try, since I'm not gonna be running this at a very high speed. I'm gonna try making I have some some steel that's supposed to be kind of semi-hardened, kind of designed for the kind of like one-off reamers where you don't need something between hardened steel and mild steel. In other words, something that you can still machine to machine it to size, but that's not so soft that it's useless. So Ryan Wilk, did you calculate for the boundary layer effect? Yes, or I did the best I could, and we're going to see how accurate that was. For those of you who don't, well, I've talked about it in some previous videos. It's just it's a flattening effect that has to do with the interaction between the bore wall and the air column. And if you don't take that into account, your instrument is going to be quite a bit flat. So yes, I did take that into account. Of course, no one's built a subcontrabassoon before, so there's no experimental data. So I had to kind of use theoretical values, and we'll see how that works out. That's what the prototype is for. Moses asks, would you ever consider making similarly sized clarinets, saxophones, or other instruments? I am a double reed guy, but if you look on YouTube, someone named Jared De Leon is working on Octocopter Clarinets as we speak. A saxophone of similar depth to this would be absolutely gigantic. Like if you've ever seen some of the most comically oversized saxophone pictures, like those B-flat subcontrabass saxophones where the bell is like this big around, that's roughly as low as a contrabassoon. So an octave lower than that, you'd be talking about a bell that's about this big around. I'd never say never. Some of those saxophone players are crazy, but I don't think that that's going to be. That's certainly not something I would do. I'm pretty much a double reed guy, so that's what I'm focusing on. I'm more likely to do something that no one wants, like a piccolo oboe or more sizes of crumb horns or something. Yeah, Xander, I did cover why I switched. The main reason I went to the wooden bell is because I figured it'd be easier to machine. Since I went to 3D printing, the kind of contrabassoon style bell became easy to do again. So I went ahead and went with that. Jacob asked, could you change the angle of the bell so that it projects directly into the audience? Yes. I mean, sure, you can point it, you could 3D print it so it points any direction you want. The thing about woodwinds, though, is they're not terribly directional. So the bell, it's really only that lowest note where it functions like a directional instrument. All the other notes, it's more like a colander, where the sound is coming out everywhere. In fact, I actually feel like of the when I've used low A extensions in the orchestra, back with my old style of low A extension that pointed directly at the ground, I actually found that was a little more impactful because it was getting more of that sound energy to the ground rather than just, pointing it at the English horn player's head or something. And Ryan asks, can it play Rite of Spring? Well, which part? There are parts of Rite of Spring it'll be able to play, I'm sure. Probably not the 3 octaves above let's see, on Subcontrabassoon, that would be up to 6th ledger line D above treble clef. So no, I'm guessing it's not going to be able to play that. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. So thank you all for coming. I know this was short notice, and I hope it was worth the wait, not getting a video on Sunday. I will keep you all up to date on Subcontrabassoon progress, and I hope you all have a great day.